Welcome to our Science News Explainer, where we're breaking down some of the biggest stories making headlines right now, from the depths of space to the very building blocks of life.
First up, we've got a major first for astronomers. A cosmic detective story about weighing a lonely planet that's just wandering the galaxy all by itself.
Then, we're going to bring it back closer to home and talk about the increasing dangers lurking right above our heads in our crowded skies.
And finally, get this, a revolutionary new material that could solve our whole forever plastic problem. Okay, let's dive into this.
All right, so we begin deep in space, where scientists have just pulled off something incredible. They've measured the mass of a rogue planet, basically an orphan world just drifting through the galaxy without a star to call home.
Now, what's really interesting is how they did it. So how do you weigh something you can't even really see directly? Well, the answer comes from this amazing technique predicted by Einstein's theory of general relativity. It's called gravitational microlensing. You can think of it like the planet's gravity is acting as a giant cosmic magnifying glass, bending the light from a star way off in the distance.
So, by observing this from two different viewpoints, here on Earth and from the Gaia Space Telescope, they were able to capture what's called the microlensing parallax. And that's the key. That let them absolutely nail down the planet's mass. Turns out it's about 22% of Jupiter's mass, so kind of Saturn-sized. This whole thing is a brilliant illustration of how planets can be violently ejected from their home system.
Okay, so let's move from way out there to a problem that is, well, much, much closer to home. Our orbital environment right above our heads is getting dangerously crowded.
Right now, there are nearly 9,500 active satellites orbiting our planet. And honestly, with new launches happening what feels like every week, that number is just going to keep growing.
All this hardware up in orbit creates a really serious risk. Space junk. And it's not just a danger to other satellites. There is a staggering 26% probability that uncontrolled re-entries of space junk will pass right through high-traffic air corridors this year alone. That's a 1 in 4 chance.
You know, the crucial point here is the uncertainty. Trying to predict exactly where a piece of debris will land is incredibly hard. In fact, the margin of error can span thousands of miles. And this leaves air traffic controllers with an absolutely impossible choice. Do you ignore a threat that's low probability but has catastrophic consequences? Or do you ground flights costing millions of dollars and disrupting everything, which is exactly what we saw happen over Spain in 2022? It's a really tough call.
All right, so from the future of flight, we're going to take a huge leap backwards in time. I'm talking millions of years into our own past, where a new discovery is changing the story of how we even learn to walk.
You know, the question of when our ancestors first stood up has always been a big one, and it looks like new evidence is pointing to a species called Sahelanthropus chadensis.
So by looking closely at its femur, that's the thigh bone, researchers found this key feature called a femoral tubercle. Now that's just a little attachment point for a ligament, but here's why it's so important. It's something we've only ever seen in bipedal human ancestors. So this suggests that while this species was still climbing trees, it was also walking upright on the ground 7 million years ago. That's a huge deal.
Okay, now let's go from our evolutionary past to the molecular level, with a new study that reveals exactly how a really common disease can physically change our most vital organ.
Researchers have basically mapped out the entire chain reaction of how type 2 diabetes damages the heart. It all starts by basically starving the heart of fuel, and that then leads to structural damage, making the heart stiff and weak. It's a pretty vicious cycle.
And you know, that's not all. There are some other major advances, like personalized cancer screening that actually helps reduce overdiagnosis. And there's a new non-addictive painkiller that marks the biggest innovation in pain management we've seen in decades. That's a potential game changer for so many people.
And finally, let's look at how science is engineering a more sustainable and intelligent future, starting with a material that literally knows when its job is done.
So, taking a page from nature, inspired by how DNA degrades, scientists have created these things called programmable plastics. What they've done is engineer weak points right into the chemical structure. That lets them design plastic that just breaks down on command into a non-toxic liquid. It's amazing.
So the really crucial point here is that we can now match a plastic's lifespan to how long we actually need to use it. We can create materials with, and I love this quote from the researchers, built-in exit strategies.
You know, when you step back and look at all this, from personalized medicine to AI that mimics the brain, to plastics we can program to just disappear,
a really clear trend emerges. Science is allowing us to engineer solutions at the most fundamental level.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, right? As our ability to customize and control the world around us gets better and better, what are the most important problems we should choose to solve? What's next?